Assalamu alaikum class. Today we are going to discuss chapter number 11 and this is our lecture number 21. The name of chapter is Standard Cost and Operating Performance Measures. First of all, we need to know what is the meaning of performance measures. Whenever we will set goals and to attain those goals, we perform some work. So we have to analyze how much work is done and what are their results. If the results are up to the standards that we set to attain goals, then it's okay. If those results are not up to the mark, up to the standards, then we will perform corrective actions, and on the base of that corrective actions, we can improve our performance and we are able to get our performance up to the mark. We will continue this topic by discussing about standard cost and operating performance. So first of all, to discuss about standard cost, we can say standard cost is that cost that is a benchmark cost, and for that purpose we need to attain those benchmarks. Like the company wanted that it will produce its product in 10 rupees, so it is their standard cost to produce the product. Like they cannot pass these cost, they cannot move beyond this cost, but yes, if they are able to produce their product less than 10 rupees, then it will show their efficiency. It means they are utilizing less input, but this is the standard and benchmark that they have to follow, that they have to incur, but they should not go beyond this cost. In managerial accounting, standard cost relates to quantity and cost of inputs used in manufacturing goods or providing services. What we will discuss in managerial accounting the quantity and costs of goods that are used, in easy words, cost of inputs, not goods, that are used to manufacture product or to provide services. As I told recently that we should not go beyond this cost. For that purpose, the concept of management by exception exists. The term management by exception is discussed to explain the meaning of benchmark, that if the quantity or the cost of inputs departs significantly from the standards, it means our inputs cost go beyond 10 rupees, then manager will investigate the discrepancy to find the cause of the problem and eliminate it. This process is called management by exceptions, that our quantity or cost should not exceed the amount of 10 rupees. If quantity or cost exceed the amount of 10 rupees, then manager will do the corrective actions. He will find out the problem, and by using his skills he will eliminate it. After explaining the concept of standard cost, the concept of standard cost card come. Standard cost card, what is it? It shows the standard quantities and cost of inputs required to produce a unit of a specific product. We will explain about the standard quantities and standard cost in our coming topics. If you remember the concept of job costing, there was a total job cost sheet in which there were heads, like if we are going to perform job number 1, for it direct material cost was written separately, direct labor cost was separately, overhead cost was separately. But to set standards for these type of activities or these type of raw material, we set standard of per unit cost. Like if I say for direct material the cost should be 10 rupees per unit, for direct labor the cost should be 5 rupees per unit, and for overhead the cost should be 7 rupees per head. So these are the costs that we set as standards. We cannot go beyond these costs. So it is the standard cost card showing per unit standard costs. Then comes the concept of ideal versus practical standard. We can say ideal standard can be defined as those standards that can be attained only under the best circumstances. Like in these type of ideal standards, there will be no breakdown of anything like time, like work, no interruptions. The level of efforts can be attained by most skilled and efficient employees working at peak effort 100% of the time. It means the ideal standard is 100%. Everything is up to the mark, everything is 100%. The direct labor is working very well, our material is up to the mark, our factory overhead is up to the standard cost. But when we will talk about practical standard, for practical standard, the standards are tight but attainable. They allow for normal machine downtime and employees rest periods, and they can be attained through reasonable efforts by the average workers. Variances from a practical standards typically need attention of management because they represent deviations that fall outside of normal operating conditions. It means in ideal standards everything is up to the mark, but in as compared to it in ideal standard there are deviations, there are variations. The efforts of workers are average, so there is need of manager to look after the matter, to do the corrective actions, to take control over the work. Now comes the method of setting direct material standards. it will consist of two parts. One is standard price per pound, or we can say price per unit, and second part is standard quantity per unit. To calculate the standard price per unit, we will start with purchase price plus freight charges minus purchase discount. We will get standard price per unit. We can say per unit of raw material or direct material. If I say for per unit of raw material the purchase price is 3.85, the freight charges for per unit of raw material is 0.24, the discount purchase discount of per unit of direct material is 0.09. Then by calculating this, our standard price per unit of raw material direct material is 4 rupees. For standard quantity per unit of direct material, material requirement allowance for spoilage allowance for rejection we will get standard quantity of per unit to produce product or per unit product. So for that we will get 2.7 rupees, 0.2, 0.1. Our standard quantity of per unit to produce is 3 units. These are the units. Quantity price. So standard cost of material per unit of finished goods will be is equal to standard price per unit multiply by standard quantity per unit 4 multiplied by 3 is equal to 12 rupees per unit cost. It is the standard cost. Standard cost for direct material can be calculated by multiplying standard price per unit with the standard quantity per unit of raw material to produce product. Then comes the concept of setting direct labor standards. In the same way, this is also consists of two parts. One part is basic wage rate per hour, plus employment taxes at the rate of 10% of basic rate, fringe benefits at 30% of basic rate. On the base of that, we will get standard rate per direct labor hour. In the same way, like if I say the basic wage rate per hour is 10 rupees, employment taxes at the rate of 10% of basic rate, 10 rupees multiplied by 10% is equal to 1 rupees. The fringe benefits at the rate of basic rate 10 multiplied by 30% is equal to 3 rupees. Our standard per direct labor hour rate is 14 rupees. The second part will be standard direct labor hour per unit of product. How this will be calculated? For that purpose, we will take basic labor time per unit, we can say in hours. Like for per unit, how many hours will be required by labor to make it. Allowance for personal need, allowance for cleanup, allowance for rejects. If I say the per hour basic rate per unit is 1.9, allowance is 0.1, 0.3 is allowance for cleanup, allowance for reject is 0.2, our total standard direct labor hour per unit of product rate is 2.5. So the standard direct labor cost will be calculated by multiplying these two rates. 14 multiplied by 2.5, it will be 35 per unit. How it is we get it? We have multiply standard rate per direct labor hour with standard direct labor hour per unit of product. So we will get standard direct labor cost.